Good evening, Chris and Andy.
Hello. Hi, Chris.
Hello, good evening. Now, you guys haven't met yet, formally. Actually, I'll introduce you guys for the people at home as well. This is Andy Brockman, a conflict archaeologist who has written extensively on various aspects of essentially warfare and archaeology. He's also obviously famously gone out to Burma to look for those Spitfires in the past. And here we have Chris Kolonko, who is the archaeologist linked with the Homefront Legacy Project, which I'm also working with in another capacity. So it's a pleasure to have you here this evening. But why are we here? We are here, of course, to talk a little bit about our impressions linked with the Battlefield 1 computer game. Now, you guys have had a chance to check out some trailers, haven't you, and some footage? Yeah. And this game comes out on October 21st. And to be honest, I'm eager to see what you guys think. I'm not a Battlefield specialist, as you can tell, given that I'm wearing a World War II helmet for a World War I video. But what I am is I'm intrigued by the issues surrounding this. So I would like to hear from you the good, the bad, the ugly, and some final thoughts, okay?
Well, having looked at the trailer, the first thing that pops out to me was the fact that it appears that the game's eventually going to show different theatres of war. Mm-hmm. So it's just going to focus on the fighting in, France and Belgium, but also further afield, such as the Middle East and even Italy, by the looks of things in the video. So I thought that was particularly good. Okay. Yeah, and naval warfare and airborne warfare is going to be covered as well. I thought that was, positive to me anyway.
Okay, so good range. Excellent.
Yes, yeah.
Andy, what do you think was good about this footage? What do you think? What are you even excited about it?
I think what this shows, it certainly shows that DICE, the developer, are trying to do something different. Mm-hmm. They've very deliberately, and they've said this in their own in the interviews and pre-publicity, they've very deliberately stepped away from the kind of latest Call of Duty incarnations where everything's done on a head-up display and it's you're fighting in a future world with very high-tech weaponry and so on. They very deliberately stepped back from that, and I think tried to connect all in a way which we have to acknowledge is a game, so it has to be entertaining and exciting for people to buy it. But they have very deliberately tried to connect with those worlds and those theatres of war, which Chris has just alluded to. And so to that extent, it's, I think, if you think that historical gaming is an interesting genre, an important genre, and I do, then I think that's a very positive thing.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So now we move on to the bad.
Come on then!
I think whether you regard any part of the game as bad would depend really on where the point you're starting from. There'll be some people who'll say that any kind of entertainment, game-based entertainment, focused on things that happened during World War I is inappropriate and disrespectful. Other people will say it's perfectly fine. We watch films, we watch stage shows like Oh, What a Lovely War that make fun, ostensibly. I think Blackadder Goes Forth was very controversial in some quarters. Yeah. So it's very much a question of attitude. And personally, I don't think World War I should be off limits per se, just because it is what it was.
Well, my main gripe was, it's quite a geeky thing really, historically speaking, but my main gripe was the way in which the warfare was portrayed. So you've got tanks shooting along the battlefield, doing 20, 30 miles an hour, when in reality they're only able to do 4 or 5, to keep up with the infantry or allow the infantry to keep up. Mm-hmm. And, seeing a massive Zeppelin just appear out in the sky, over the battlefields. They were my main gripes with the fact that, the warfare portrayed was a lot quicker than would have been, and you wouldn't have had Zeppelins flying about your heads, dropping bombs, strafing, while you're trying to take an enemy trench line.
Okay, so now it's time for the ugly. What do you think needs a little bit of a nudge, or possibly just maybe distracts you a little bit in this footage? Let's start this time with you, Chris.
Well, the ugly. For me, it was again one of accuracy and just the general look of the game. So you've got German soldiers kitted out, in particular in that first video where you see the either an American doughboy or a British Tommy running towards a German soldier in the fields. You know, they come face to face, and the German seems to be wearing this hyper-realistic, reimagined uniform with crutches stuck down his webbing at the back, and you know, it didn't quite look First World War to me. So I thought, given that other games have been done covering the subject of trench warfare, such as a game called Verdun, which is far more accurately presented. So uniforms are, you know, what you'd expect to see in a historical textbook or photographs of the period. I think if the developers had gone more along the lines of giving an accurate representation of the uniforms and the kit, I think that would have made the game look slightly better to me anyway.
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say it was, I was distracted by the footage. I was actually quite engaged by the footage, and it's obviously doing its job. I'd like to pick up Chris's point actually about the look of the thing. I think there is almost a sort of steampunk look to some of the visuals.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting in terms of where we are culturally. And in a sense, again, we're dealing with creative artists making a representation for entertainment purposes. We're not dealing with a textbook. And yes, there are people who want hyper-accurate, hyper-realistic sims where you need to download the full manual before you can fly the aeroplane and so on. And that's not what we're dealing with here.
No.
And I think as a cultural artifact in the centenary year of World War I, it's very interesting. I'm actually going to reserve judgment on the whole thing until I've had a chance to see the final release build, because I think it's never fair really to go absolutely on the record over again before it's been before it was released, and in case of PC games, before it's had the first patch.
Well, yeah, of course, absolutely.
Move forward! Get ready, man!
I have to say, one thing which I was struck by, especially in the weapons little video, again, link below to watch, was the fact that they downright said in that piece that they're not this isn't history that they're telling.
World War I was the birth of a lot of the things that we take for granted in modern warfare. All of these tools were created for a special purpose. Right there, right now, they needed to solve a problem, and they came up with this variety of tools.
We're not recreating the past. We're taking that as an inspiration, and then we're trying to take this into a modern perspective.
So they're sort of reimagining elements of weaponry. They're sort of, as you say, sort of steampunkifying in some respects, which is absolutely fine. But I suppose to open up and invite some final thoughts on this. Is that okay? I mean, I know. I'm sort of hearing from you, Andy, this sort of like total on the fence kind of. No, I don't want to judge them. They're artists and all that kind of thing. But actually, that's fine. I mean, for example, actually, and this I'll just bring this into it. Recently, I watched the Wonder Woman trailer from Comic-Con, where Wonder Woman is there with a shield on the battlefield, in no man's land, bracing herself against machine gun fire from the German trenches. And funnily enough, I've got zero qualms about that, because that is definitely fiction. They're using the First World War pastiche, and they're putting it into this sort of fictional setting. I get the impression certainly from the way that people approach Battlefield 1, that it feels like it's selling itself as historical, if you see what I mean, in many respects. And so that's where I just start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. But again, what do you guys think? Any sort of final thoughts on that line between, I suppose, history, art, the computer game, but also actually the fact that lots of people will walk away from this assuming what they've played is realistic. I've heard people talking like that online about the game.
Yeah,
I think this whole issue of realism in games, in any kind of cultural medium is a very interesting one. I mean, I remember a line from a concentration camp survivor who argued once that that kind of experience could never be put on film, because if it was put on film in anything like a realistic way, an audience couldn't bear it. But then this year we've seen a film like Son of Saul come out, which takes a first-person view of those experiences. So, and it's come out to great acclaim. So I think a lot of it depends on the intention and on the and on the audience. I mean, I think, in a sense, you know, whatever you think of Battlefield 1, it is what it is, and it will be what it will be, and it will sell in what volume it sells. The job that we have as people, as archaeologists, as subject specialists, and as gamers and people who, you know, enjoy playing computer games, is to make sure that the education is there for people that want it, that the information's out there in the public domain for people who want to go and look up more about the weapons or more about the uniforms, or was it really like that, and so on. But I mean, I think just my final thought of it, on it really, is that I think the cultural historians are going to have a blast with it, because amongst other things, there's also the references to David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia in the desert sequences. So it's already feeding off popular images and popular culture of World War I, which already exist.
Yeah, okay, excellent.
I personally think that the game has the potential to act as a gateway into the subject. You know, the game itself doesn't have to be particularly historically accurate, because, as Andy has said, it's, you know, it is what it is. It's not a First World War simulation or a military simulation. It's, you know, first-person shooter aimed at a set audience. So in that respect, I think it'll give people the push or the impetus, or, you know, the general interest in the subject to look into it further and, you know, do their own research and, question what's presented in the game. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, did tanks shoot around the battlefield, or why did they go so slow? You know, and it'll set the ball rolling to further the interest in the subject, and, you know, it might lead them elsewhere as well, into other conflicts such as the Second World War, or other interests as well. So I think.
Can I make one last point, Mark? It's just occurred to me listening to Chris, and that is that by stripping away the, if you want to, at least, you know, the whole head-up display element, by putting you up against other human beings in cloth uniforms, where you can, in some of the sequences at least, see their faces and so on, it is making it much more up close and personal. You're not blasting away at aliens or Nazis, we hate these guys. It's a much more personal incarnation of that. Now, whether that will sell to an audience is an interesting question as well. It'd be interesting to see what the numbers are when it's finally released. But I think in terms of something that could provoke other thoughts about war and why people fight each other and so on, that could get interesting too.
Okay. To be fair, I don't think this is going to have any problem selling. The series is very popular, and you know, people are talking about it all over the place. I suppose I'm just intrigued by this whole prospect, really. I mean, as I've admitted in previous videos, you know, I very much have enjoyed, for example, the Call of Duty series in the past. That, you know, setting the world especially in the Second World War settings. But for some reason, Battlefield 1 just struck a chord, and I just wanted to talk about it. And I think it is interesting that we are having this game right now. But it's been a pleasure hearing from two specialists who don't particularly have a problem with it, which is fair enough. Where can people find out more if they want to?
Well, the project I'm working on, which is called Homefront Legacy, is all about enabling people to do their own research and investigate First World War sites on the home front in the UK, as opposed to, you know, directly being connected with warfare firsthand. So the thing we're focusing on is home front sites, and such as how factories supported the war effort, how local people maybe took in soldiers who were wounded and started volunteering, as well as the military aspects of things as well. So the areas set aside for soldiers to be trained and things like that. So projects like Homefront Legacy will allow people to actively get involved with preserving and recording the First World War legacy in the UK as well.
I think where people go for information depends very much on their particular interests, and there is so much material out there, particularly online now, that it really is horses for courses. Couple of projects I can think of off the top of my head that are worth looking at. The Plug Street project, for one, in Plug Street in Belgium. I think it's an exemplary cooperation between countries, between archaeologists and historians, between civilians and military. It ticks all sorts of boxes, and that's a very interesting one to start with. So yeah, Plug Street project in Belgium.
Okay, well, you've plugged that, so I'll put the link below. Again, thank you guys for coming on and commenting. I mean, in my previous video looking at one of the trailers, I know I might have come across to some people watching as though I was very much against the idea of a game, and that's not the case at all. I suppose I was just curious what it meant, I suppose, and I suppose from the archaeological perspective, it sounds as though actually you guys are kind of on the standpoint where, well, this obviously isn't real, so there's no point in judging it on that merit, which is absolutely fair enough. So again, thank you so much for turning up. Thank you for wearing appropriate headgear, Chris. And I hope to hear from you both in the near future. I
was just thinking, I hope you'll not let Chris out of his bunker now. He's clearly in this World War I dugout.
Yeah.
The last candle has just burnt out just before we started recording.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also love the propeller in the background there. That was excellent.
Oh, it's Royal Flying Corps. It must be Royal Flying Corps.
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, precisely. Well, as I say, hopefully we'll hear from you guys again in a future video at some point. But as ever, until next time, guys at home, do take care. Bye-bye.